Welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. My name is Geerte Frenken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive fathers by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlement. And what I want to share with you today, before I introduce my guest, is an announcement about a protective mother who is currently in prison. And what I will do here is I will share my screen with you and show you what you can do to help. So here we are. If you go to my Facebook page, Free as Mine from Court Ordered Abduction, you'll see here an announcement that I placed on August 10th. And it's asking everybody to please call and email the district attorney on behalf of domestic violence victim and protective mother Mandy, who was railroaded and wrongfully incarcerated with an absolutely insane bail amount, and I believe it is $750,000. That happens because she supposedly checked the wrong box on a form when she was in family court. So this is absolutely outrageous. She has been in jail since February for absolutely no reason. And we need your help. You can help by calling the LADA and requesting to release Mandy from prison. And when you click on this post here, you see her in the hospital due to her abusive ex. This is posted by the Women's Coalition, and if you click on it, you'll see here the phone number from the LADA and an email address, and all you do is write your own email, or you can just copy and paste this entire email and just send it, or call the DA and then just read this out. This would help tremendously. We need to get this mother out. This is completely outrageous. She's suffering in there, and this is one way for you to help. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and introduce you to my guest today. And today's guest is protective mother and child advocate Ruth Collins, who lost custody, parental rights, and visitation of her two children to her abusive ex when she spoke out at a community forum about the dysfunction of the main family court system, and the judge in her case took revenge. Wow, yeah, I'm very honored to have Ruth on as a guest today, so welcome to Hell is for Children, Ruth.
Thank you, Geerte. I am very excited to be here, and I just appreciate you doing this show for all of us protective mothers out there to help us get our word out. I appreciate being a guest today.
Well, the show wouldn't be anything without guests like you who are courageous enough to share your story, which is not easy to do, and I realize that. But we need to do it because otherwise no one knows what's going on. So I applaud all the protective mothers who are in a situation that they can go public with their case. And you are. So thank you for being on the show. And let's start with how you ended up in the situation that you're in today.
Thank you, Geerte. You know, they say hindsight is 20/20. And every day I wake up and I go to bed and all I think about is this situation, and it's only in reflection and in hindsight that I can kind of somewhat wrap my head around what has happened. But when you're going through it, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was in for or where I was headed. As a matter of fact, when we divorced in 2006, I had no idea that I would have categorized our relationship and our post-judgment co-parenting style as one of power and control, and one of being the subject of domestic abuse, or what I've learned since then, maternal deprivation or DV by proxy. I happened to have a neighbor friend who was working for a domestic violence shelter organization, and I was explaining to her one of the emails that I had received as a newly divorced mom. I had the 2 minor children with me at the time, and she looked at me and she heard my story and she said, "Do you realize that that's domestic abuse?" And I said, "What do you mean? I have always been taught, or the media portrayal or the public education awareness campaigns always focus on, if you've got a spectrum and you get verbal and emotional, psychological abuse on one end of the spectrum, but you've got the homicide and the physical beatings on the other end. They tend to focus on that end of the spectrum." So I was really taken back by what she was saying, but I trusted her, and she said, "You really should join a group, a weekly group, and just get some support in this." And I did. But again, at the time, I was the custodial and residential parent. It was 50-50 rights and decision-making power, but I had my children with me 5 days a week. I was still their primary caregiver, as I had been since birth. And I had no idea the road I was going to take, and I had no idea what I was going to learn. But hindsight is 20/20, and I've learned a lot since then. And I feel compelled, as painful as this is and as horrific as it is, I feel compelled to share this information and this experience and this story because I want to stop other moms, families, and children from going through this destructive path that they too could step into, as I did, and be completely blindsided. So that's why I feel it is necessary for me to get out there and be on that advocate bandwagon and become a public speaker and a public voice for those who feel like they don't have a voice.
Now, let's start with, you had the 50-50 custody. So your kids were living with you, or were they going back and forth, or?
We had to, in the initial divorce, we had to sell our marital home. It was a rather large, expensive home, and we sold it and split the equity, and I was able to buy a very humble little condominium in which the children and I resided. We stayed in the same community in which the kids had gone to preschool and were in the school system. It was the only community that they knew and were familiar with. It was where all their friends were. And I was able to make our life remain there, where Dad chose to move off. He moved away, bouncing from house to house to house, initially with his parents, with his brother's, summer home, and just had moved like almost every 6 months. So the kids were stable with me. They were with me Saturday afternoon through Thursday afternoon. And then Dad would get them after school on Thursday and then have them Thursday night. They'd go off to school all day Friday. He'd have them Friday night, and then we'd be back with me on Saturday at 4. And that's how it was for the first, that's how it was for the first 4, almost 5 years of our divorce. But he started the next step in depriving me of my maternal bond with my children the end of 2009. So it was about 3 years after our initial divorce that he went to court and got a lawyer and wanted to change. I didn't quite understand, but he wanted to change the custody and the visitation so that our son would be with him 5 days a week and our daughter would be with him 3 days a week. And I got what was ever left over. And that really enraged me because I thought, what kind of a message are you giving to our daughter? And they were young. Let's see, 2009, they would have been 11 and 10, or 12 and 10, something like that. They were too young, in my opinion, to split up. That they were close, they were tight siblings. They cared for each other, they loved each other. That's all they knew is our little unit. And I just thought that was like just a wrong message to be giving my daughter, that your father wants your brother more than he wants you.
Yeah.
Your father, it was almost like right from the get-go, like I said, in hindsight, I could see him starting to, what I would call, grooming my son. A good example would be when we split the marital assets, Dad said to me, do you mind if I buy Sean an ATV with the equity from the sale of our home? And I thought, well, that's kind of a weird question. Like, why is he asking me permission to spend his own money? And I said, certainly you can do whatever you want. It's your money. I said, I'm going to put all my money into a home, but if you want to buy, toys for the kids, go ahead. And it took a few weeks for me to figure out that he was only buying something for Matthew and not our daughter. So I waited a little bit to see if he would do anything different, and he didn't. So I asked him, please, would you consider doing something equally important for our daughter? I thought it was important to show both kids that you were willing to dote on both kids equally. And that became one of the entanglements at post-divorce co-parenting, was that I was trying to advocate for our daughter back then, and he just didn't want to. He would have the kids spend their weekend with him, that Thursday to Saturday. As my daughter Amber would tell me later, she would be stuck watching her brother ride around on his ATM. That was their time. That was their quality time spent, with her being made to just sit and watch her brother enjoy this expensive toy. So again, in hindsight, I look back and like, wow, he was already back then starting to groom the whole situation where, father, son would kind of separate between mom and daughter and divide us. And I didn't like that. I thought that both kids should be treated equally by both parents, so that they both learn that they're equally valued and loved by both parents. It was the marriage that dissolved. It shouldn't have been the way we treated our children. So.
Absolutely. And the grooming that you're bringing up is a really good point, because I see that in a lot of the cases, that these abusive guys really plan out. They really have a strategy, and they plan it out over years on how they set up the mom to lose the kids, or set up the children against the mother. It's like a campaign that they launch that spans several years.
Right. And and again, like a lot of things that were said to me through the kids, repeated back to me that didn't make sense at the time. They would kind of make little comments and whatnot, and they stayed with me because they were odd comments, but I never knew what they meant until now. I can look back and figure, this is what that meant, and now I get it. And it to me, it just supports and validates that this wasn't just some bad luck case that had one judge or one lawyer or one GAL that just made a bad decision. It was several professionals over several in and out of court, over several episodes where, in my opinion, my children were failed. They failed to protect my children. They failed to protect the sanctity of what we had as a newly divorced family. And in my opinion, they didn't make any effort to look at what was best for the children. It was more of using the conflict as a way for them to just make more money. The more conflict, the more that they can stir the pot, the more that they can convince my former husband that, he was entitled to so much more. And I certainly can see now, with a compassionate heart, how he was also taken advantage of as well. Like, they just saw his need to control, and they coached him along the way.
I think that's also a really good point to bring that up, because that's another thing I see in a lot of the cases, that these fathers are often used by these professionals just to make money, for these professionals to make money, and they don't even realize it. They don't even realize that they're used as a tool to extort the mother for money.
Right. Mm-hmm. I agree. Again, looking back in hindsight and able to look at the whole big picture of what took place, there were so many people that were involved. We've had more than the same lawyer, more than one particular post-judgment trip back to court. Many therapists, many counselors, many GALs, many people who had the ability to protect the children's well-being and their development, but instead just for whatever reason saw the dollar signs. Our very last lawyer, he had my present husband and I convinced that he would help us. The very last trial when I was trying to prevent them from stripping me of my parental rights. As much as I hated the idea of spending more money on yet another lawyer, especially when we were so depleted from all the other trips in and out of court, my present husband just insisted on it. He said, you don't realize, this is serious. They're going right after your parental rights. We need to defend you. And we were naive enough to think that this lawyer could help us. And he actually, again, the red flag was up in the 11th hour when it was 6 p.m. the night before an 8:30 trial, and he still hadn't put our argument together.
Let's go back before you get to this event, though, because you were still on the point. Yeah, you were still on the point where, like, he was, your ex was favoring your son over your daughter, and there was that was creating frictions, of course, between your son and your daughter. But how did the father then go after you in court to increase the amount of custody for himself?
Thank you, Geerte, for bringing me back. The end result of that court process, where he was looking to get our son 5 days and our daughter 3 days, was I was being pretty darn stubborn. I was making sure that whatever happened, that the kids stay together. And I wasn't being as cooperative as they would have liked me to be. But I knew intuitively and instinctively what was best for my children. I was their mother. At one point, they had us go through mediation yet again. We spent more time in mediation that was supposed to be helpful, but as I've learned later, you can't mediate with these types of personalities. There's just no ability to reason or cooperate. It's their way or no other way. And that makes it really difficult when there's two parents involved. It felt very much like a dictatorship.
Yeah, you can't negotiate with a terrorist.
No, it started to feel very much like a dictatorship. And so the more I tried to advocate for myself and for my children, the more I was framed as being uncooperative. The end result was I made the mistake, and this is one more tidbit for listeners to realize, is that when you have a guardian ad litem involved in your case, they are not bound, from my understanding, they're not bound by confidentiality. So, for example, you have a lawyer representing you, and your former partner has a lawyer representing them. Whatever you say to your lawyer, in theory, should be confidential and vice versa. But the guardian ad litem, I made the mistake of saying to her, if anything changed with the residency and changed child support, I was at the time initially getting alimony and child support, which afforded me to give our children a home. I was providing for our kids. It made sense for me to have the alimony and the child support. But if anything was to shift with time spent, the threat was that the child support would lessen or go away. And I let her know that I was fearful for any financial change coming from Dad, who was quite wealthy, with a very wealthy family, would potentially force me out of my home. I wouldn't have the ability to pay for a very humble. Now, this home, you back up, our marital home was a 2,500 square foot, 4-bedroom colonial. And when I moved out with my assets, all I could afford was a 2-bedroom condo in which I gave 1 bedroom to daughter, 1 bedroom to son, and I literally slept in a twin bed in a hallway where I had no privacy. And that was my sacrifice to give my kids the best that I thought that they should have. And we were okay. So it wasn't as if I was living high off the hog. So this was with his child support and alimony. I still had to sacrifice the privacy of having my own private bedroom. I had to live in a hallway at the top of our stairs. And he had custom built homes. So it wasn't as if he was out in the car and I was in this nice house. Anyways, I made the mistake of telling the GAL that if there was any change in child support that I would potentially lose my home and I wouldn't have a place to go and I wouldn't have a roof for my children. And I'm guessing, it's just guess, but I'm guessing that got back to legal team because lo and behold, my former husband stopped paying child support. All of a sudden, the checks stopped coming. And 1 week turned into 2, 2 weeks turned into a month, 1 month turned into 3. And at that point, I was starting to get foreclosure notices on my home. And so it was at that point where my attorney said, again in the 11th hour, I'm suggesting that you quit fighting, that you just sign whatever it is that they are presenting to you, and just accept it. And I asked her why she would quit on us. And she said, well, I could keep spending your money, but I can guarantee you we're going to lose. And I had no idea what that meant. Again, now, 5 years later, I do know what that means. But at the time, I was completely overwhelmed that an attorney would actually tell me to quit because we were going to guaranteed lose. How do you know that? But now I know. So looking at homelessness, I turned residential custody over to Dad, who had built himself a custom home in the same town that we were all living in, and had sold everybody the idea that he came back to town to give the kids stability and consistency and to support them as I was supporting them. And I thought, well, any good mother would make sure their kids were in a good home rather than homeless. So despite my intuition, which was screaming, don't do it, I didn't know of any other options, so I signed over residential custody to Dad.
Yeah, you were coerced. You were coerced because you were threatened with homelessness. Yes. And then they said, look, you're about to get homeless, so you better give the kids to him.
Right, right.
So it's true. If he had that kind of money, he should have said, if he was a supportive parent, he should have said, let me make sure that your monthly mortgage payment is less and help you out.
Right. Right. And again, looking back in the moment when I'm trying to manage a full-time job, still managing my kids because they were still with me up to the signing of the agreement. So managing my kids' lives, my work life, our home life. We had a dog. And in my opinion, trying to be my own lawyer, because sometimes these lawyers don't really act like they're working in your best interest. So sometimes even though you've hired a lawyer, you still have to do your legal work for yourself. They're managing multiple cases and you're just one case.
Well, in your case, you had a lawyer that actually helped your ex. Your lawyer did not give you the proper advice.
Right.
Your lawyer should have said, "I'm going to help you fight for your children." And
Right. And again, looking back, a nurturing father would not have, we were now in the same town. So in my opinion, a nurturing father would have been 3.5 days, 3.5 days. Whatever it takes to keep the roof over the head of you and your children, I'm there for you.
Yep.
And let's work together for the better of the kids. But what had happened, which I was unprepared for, was as soon as he was awarded in August 4th, 2010, awarded residential custody of the children, he put his home up for sale. And he later disclosed to me in a phone conversation that his attorney at the time told him to move into town, to get the leverage, to take the kids from me. And the whole time he knew he'd be moving up north where his girlfriend resided, and that they were going to have a life together. The kids, his girlfriend, and he made good on that promise. He moved the kids 45 miles north.
You see how they strategize, right? I mean, it just goes to show that they have an entire strategy that spans years, and that they sit together with the lawyers and figure out how to do that in the most effective way, or amongst each other in these fathers' rights groups.
Yeah. It blew me away, Geerte, because he literally built the house from, the ground up. And like, who puts that much effort into just gaining leverage? Like who, because we built our marital home. I know it's very exhausting to build your home. And I thought, gosh, that's a lot of effort to manipulate the system. But he had the fire, and he had the ambition, and he had the drive, and he succeeded. He moved them. When I lost my home, the only way to maintain my home and not go into foreclosure was to get a tenant in there that could pay the rent, that paid a mortgage. And I moved in with a friend of mine that was in the next state. So I moved 13 miles south from our marital home or community. He took the kids and moved them 45 minutes north from there. So he then used the geographical distance between us, as even though I had them every other weekend and every Wednesday at that point, he said, well, now that we're so far from each other, the kids are too busy with school and homework, you can only see them every other weekend, and that's it. So immediately, not only did he move them away, but then he went against the court order and denied me my every Wednesday afternoon. And the kids learned very quickly that, to keep dad happy, they would parrot that back to me, that they were too busy to see me for all of 2 hours on Wednesday afternoons, which meant me driving up to them. I wouldn't have, you know what I mean? Like, so I was the one that was, going almost an hour each way. They still decided to parrot what dad was saying, and said that they were too busy to be with me on Wednesday afternoon. So I went from having them 20 days a month to 4 days a month. And that was really hard, really hard. I missed my babies.
Of course, you've been like the sole, the main primary caregiver in their lives for many years. I mean, you're talking about children who are 10, 11, 12 years old, that you're completely bonded with you, and all of a sudden you only see them 4 days in the month. That's extremely difficult to deal with. And it's interesting as you're sharing the story how he's built it up, right? He's taken, it's not a one time, it's not an abrupt change. They gradually do it. It's like if you throw a frog in boiling water, it will get the shock. But if you put the pot with cold water and the frog on the fire, and you slowly turn up the heat,
right?
There'll be less resistance. What these fathers don't realize is that the mother-child bond can never be broken.
Right.
And, however, they build it up.
Exactly. And to make it even more challenging was just immediately our youngest, my daughter Amber, would reach out to me, email, text message, Facebook, telling me she's crying all the time. She misses me. She wants to go back to living with me. And the young children, I protected them from as much as I could possibly protect them from anything that was going on. How do you explain to a young child, why can't they just simply move back with mom? And that to me is like, now I understand why the United Nations would frame this as terroristic tactics, and how this is the most horrendous form of child abuse that you could perpetrate is to take a child away from their mom that they're bonded with. And in the child's mind, they don't understand why they just can't simply move back. It wasn't, it wasn't that simple. And how do you explain that without getting into the gory details of court and lawyers? And I was getting emails from my former husband after that not telling, more like angry emails, alleging how I abandoned the children, how the
Right.
suffering.
Yeah, that's what they do. First, they alienate you from the kids, and then they tell the kids, "See, your mom doesn't love you.
Yeah.
Your mom doesn't care. She doesn't want to spend time with you."
Yeah.
Like I've sent, for example, like over 100 emails to my daughter, and she probably never got them. Right? I mean,
I've had every communication blocked. I've had, and again, as you know, that was contempt, because in the court orders, they're always very, clever to put in that neither parent can block their children from communication, but there's no enforcement of a lot of this stuff. He was in contempt so many times, and I rarely called him on it, because as the advice I kept getting, I stayed in touch with advocates from the domestic violence and abuse organizations. I kept in touch, just because all the legals in and out, like sometimes they'd help me with legal paperwork. A lot of times I was pro se, and they were helpful because they had some legal support for survivors of these types of cases. But I just lost my train of thought. Where was I going?
You were at the contempt order. How did I just ignore it?
I just like it's so hard to talk about this.
I know.
Yeah, and I was always advised by them that, pick your battles. If he's in contempt, is it really worth a trip back? It could be perceived as frivolous trips to the courts if I call on every contempt action. So, for the most part, a lot slide, which is ironic, because there was one part in 2013 that I was court ordered to do something that I physically could not do. And within 11 days of that court order, there was a sheriff knocking on my door, serving me contempt papers. So there wasn't a whole lot of compassion or empathy from the other end.
The fathers can be vexatious litigants, but if the mothers do it, we get retaliated for it.
Yeah. And it's a challenge, but it is what it is. I've tried several times to try to speak reason, and reason fell on deaf ears. I tried several times to be cooperative, but I could never be cooperative enough. I did everything that I was supposed to do, and it just was never enough. And it's amazing how creative a GAL can be in trying to write a report against a mother when there's nothing to go on. They can be very creative. And again, another thing I found out the hard way is that, at least in the state that I was working in, that guardian ad litems have quasi-judicial immunity, which prevents them from ever being sued for malpractice or poor judgment. So basically, any guardian ad litem can charge, whatever fees they want to. Usually they charge fees similar and equitable to a lawyer, but they don't necessarily need to do a thorough report. They don't need to do a thorough investigation, and they don't really need to necessarily thread a report together that's completely full of facts. I've seen them use objective as opposed to subjective information, and I've seen physical evidence of, in my opinion, was abuse be totally thrown out and dismissed. It wasn't something that you could fabricate. This was something that was should have been taken seriously by the court, and it was not. So I learned a lot, and it's been quite the journey. But I fought hard to be involved with my children as much as possible. It meant getting really creative on who you contacted to find out about parent-teacher conferences and medical appointments and sporting events and awards for academics, because he made a point to never inform me, again, despite court order that he was supposed to. And you make, a lot of effort not to put kids in the middle. So you're not always going to the kids asking, what's going on. You hate to keep putting them in the middle. You're not supposed to. So it was a lot of work to try to figure out what was going on in their lives so I could be present and be active so that he couldn't keep alleging that I had abandoned them and that I had a new life with a boyfriend and that was more important than my own children. Yeah. It was really interesting, the challenges of trying to stay one step ahead.
Yeah, you have to get into the mind of sociopaths, and that's not an easy thing if you have a heart.
No, it's not. And that's why, like I said, I was unprepared for so much of it because I just couldn't imagine existing like that. Like, that's a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of effort. And as they had said to me one time in a support group for domestic abuse survivors was, if we could spend more energy on raising our children and spend more energy on nurturing our children and spend more energy on our jobs and providing financial support of our children, that would be in the best interest of our kids. But instead, when you're in this, high conflict, co-parenting situation that involves multiple lawyers and multiple guardian items and multiple, court appearances, and you're pro se and you have to make a defense for yourself and learn how to be a lawyer in like 3 weeks, you don't have time for your kids and you don't have energy for your job. And it's amazing. It just dawned on me the other day. It's like we don't ask, families of homicide victims to investigate the homicide, come up with the case and try it. There are professionals for that. We don't ask, rape victims to investigate the situation, collect evidence, and try the case. There are professionals for that. And the one glaring missing place where there's no one to support is in domestic abuse and domestic violence and maternal deprivation or DV by proxy. It's the survivor who's meant to defend herself and to prove herself innocent when she's being framed as guilty. And you stay guilty unless you're capable of proving yourself innocent. And it's not.
Right, and then you're expected to learn about the law, even if you have no such knowledge or skills to get into all of that.
Right.
And even if you do, for those of us that do,
right,
we come across corruption and being, evidence being ignored, false statements, false allegations.
Right. Right. They know a lot more than us because that's their profession. That's what they went to school for. That's their educational background, and that's their professional expertise. It's really hard. I had one instance, and I was really darn proud of myself, where I was pro se going up against my former husband, and his attorney was present. I actually won. And that was with a magistrate, I believe. It wasn't with a judge. And that was trying to reduce the child support that was court ordered. It was based on an income I never earned. I've worked, since I was 16 years of age, and I'm almost 51. And they had based my child support on an income in my entire working lifetime, even working 2 jobs, I've never earned. And they framed it as potential to earn. What they were truly trying to do, and I credit this magistrate because she called the attorney on it. They were trying to include my present husband's income as my income, and there's a legal term for it that escapes me at this present time. And that's what they were trying to do, was like even though she's never earned that amount of money, she has potential because she's married to this guy. And that's illegal. And so she called my former husband's attorney on that, and they ruled in my favor, which was not a huge difference, but it was more for me at that point. It was more of, I'm going to start losing my words because it's such a stressful situation for me to relive. It was more principle. It was more principle at that point. It was more of, I wanted to be able to go in and just have a ruling based on principle, even though it was a difference of like maybe $20 a week, you know, in child support. It wasn't really a huge savings in which I was going to start living a different quality of life, but it was the principle of me overpaying a man who makes and always have more money than I. It was more out of principle. But yeah, that was the one time that actually was ruled in my favor, and it felt good. It felt hopeful for moms who are out there being pro se and need to go up against.
You're always getting shot down. Like all the cases that we see come by on Facebook, it's like 90% of the cases, the moms just get shot down no matter what they try. It's like a slaughter. It's a battlefield for the moms. Just get slaughtered mercifully.
I've been threatened. Yeah, I mean, they always, like, they've used like little veiled threats, you know. For example, there was one time when, way back when we weren't, I think we were still, everything was 50-50, all financial expenses for kids were 50-50, and my daughter Amber in 7th grade was elected in her school to travel to Costa Rica with her classmates, and it was a $3,000 trip. And I wanted her to go. They picked only 80 kids out of like 300. And she was elected because she was academically, you know, inclined and had civic responsibility and was just really mature and, you know, a really responsible kid. And I thought that was quite an honor. You know, she's been beaten down and beaten down and beaten down and beaten down. As far as self-worth is concerned, I thought this is a great way to kind of build her back up again and give her an amazing opportunity. But her dad didn't want her to go, mainly because he didn't want to share in the expense of it. So I took the expense on my own. I didn't want to deny her that. And we were in court for something, and I brought that up as far as, you know, would he be willing to assist me and support her trip? And he flat out said no. And I was kind of fighting for the court to support me, like, you know, and they get away with it because it has to be agreed upon expenses, and it's 50-50. And if he can get out of it by just disagreeing. And when I was kind of pushing it in court, the magistrate just put out a veiled threat on the lines of, if I kept pushing, I might get, you know, worse than what I went in for. You know, she could, I forget what the exact threat is, but it was very clear that I was to let it all go and just eat that expense and not fight for what I thought was right. But I was taken at that she threatened me, you know. I was like, okay.
So it sounds like you were in court for various things that were happening along the line. You were still having 4 days with your children a month.
Correct.
And
Correct.
then at some point you lost that as well. Tell us about the event that led up to that particular termination, so to speak.
Okay, Geerte. It started the end of 2012. Toward the end of 2012, my former husband had successfully moved up, way up north. His, at the time, girlfriend moved in with her son. And as soon as Nicole moved in with him, papers were submitted to the court to take away my parental rights. So that led to a 14th month slugfest. There was no way in heck I was going to not go down fighting hard. during that time, we had a new guardian ad litem. And during that time, the home environment in which my daughter was living in was becoming more and more hostile. So she was having more and more behavioral issues. I taught both kids to be empowered. I taught both kids to have a voice. I taught both kids to be empathic and to stand up for others. I used to teach a safety and educational program for kids in which we discussed bullying, and we talked about the importance of standing up for other people. Every time she advocated for herself or I advocated for her, there was some type of retaliatory action. It got to the point where it was going to be too difficult for me, and I was finishing up my last year at university, and I had to do an internship in a research paper at the same time that I was more or less pro se for a trial that involved my parental rights. And so I asked my professor, first I was going to drop out because I couldn't handle the stress. I was going to drop out of school. And they said, no, we're not going to allow you. You've come this far. You've worked too hard. We're not going to let you drop out. You're going to get through this. We'll help you. And I said, well, can I combine the fact that I need to be my own lawyer and I'm going pro se and I'm battling this incredible, in my opinion, maternal deprivation / domestic violence by proxy situation. Could I intern at a DV organization, research it, and then use it as my research paper? So I'm doing double duty, so I'm not,
So you were in school for a law degree?
Well, actually, I was going to. I was getting my BA in gender studies, and I was going to use that as a springboard to go off to law school so I could do exactly what it is that I'm going to try to do now, and that's provide support for women and families going through this situation. I got
Awesome.
the BA, but thank you. I got the BA, but I never got into law school because when I saw what was going on and I saw the culture, I didn't think that was the best use of my time or my money. I had a wonderful lawyer from the university that helped me as a university student. That's another resource for moms, is if you're a university student, sometimes they have legal representation. And this lovely lawyer, she helped me the best she could. She couldn't represent me, but she could certainly help educate me and direct me. And she admitted to me that, these things happen. She gave me some advice and some avenues to pursue, but she also coupled that with, you didn't hear this from me. So I got the message loud and clear that if you were to stay practicing and to keep your license, you became very quiet about some of the injustices that were taking place. You either colluded and became a part of it, or you turned a blind eye and you were silent about it. Or if you spoke up, you risked losing your license to practice. And that's probably why a lot of reasons why lawyers won't do pro bono work for DV survivors, and they won't get involved.
I've been actually told that as well. If we take on your case, we're going to be retaliated against.
I've seen it. It's amazing to watch it before your eyes. It's very surreal. So I was able to write this lovely research paper, and it was basically, I had a lot of research and things to back up what my my statement was, is that family court really does not do justice for domestic violence survivors, and I listed a bunch of examples. So in my research, I came across a grassroots organization in the state of Maine that was being very loud and vocal about guardian ad litems and their role in their opinion, their misuse of power and their lack of accountability and their inability to really put kids' needs first. And they invited me to participate in a forum, a public forum that was taking place in Portland. Our trial had gone on and had been heard the beginning of December. Before Christmas, we went to trial. The judge said that he would have an answer in a couple of weeks. He had to go back to his chambers and research law and yada, yada, yada. And he would get back, with a judgment within a couple of weeks. And I thought, okay, so at least I'll have an answer before Christmas and we can kind of move on from this chapter. Weeks went by, nothing. And I'm like, well, that's kind of odd. He promised to get this wrapped up really quick. But nothing. In the meantime, I was invited to speak at this public forum. This grassroots organization had put together a bunch of people. We were all going to present our concerns on how the court system really wasn't looking out for the best interest of the children. There was so many areas that they could improve upon, and we could certainly help them with that because we're the ones that experience. We're the consumers of it. I believe in the state of Maine, 74% of the people appearing in family court are pro se. We cannot afford legal representation. 74% are pro se. So there's only so many people who can afford representation, and it's the same lawyers. So they have it down pat. And so I show up at this forum. I'm rushing from my college class. I'm rushing in. I'm getting in there right as they're closing and locking the door for this public forum. And lo and behold, this committee that's been traveling all over the state of Maine to have public input, and it's all couched and framed as we really care and we want your input, and with your input we're going to make positive changes, and we're all going to work together, public and judiciary, to work for the betterment of the kids. And my jaw almost hit the floor because on that committee was the judge that heard my trial a little over a month before. And I had a decision to make. I could either shut up and be quiet and be scared and fearful and just sit in the court and not say a word. But I refuse to kowtow to fear. I refuse to be silenced. It's just one of my character traits. I just refuse to be silenced. So I opted to go up and I started to speak, and I presented all my research information. I presented my research paper. I presented articles, to support that family court fails victims of domestic abuse. And he recognized who I was about 3 or 4 minutes into my testimony and told me to stop.
The judge did?
Yeah, he said, "Did I hear your trial? Did I hear you? Did I preside over your trial last month?" I said, "Yes, you did." He said, "Well, he says, I haven't ruled on that yet. I need to ask you to stop, and I need to state that I'm not going to look at any of the paper that you submitted." Now, in hindsight, I'm thinking, Geerte, I'm like, couldn't he just have removed himself?
Yes. Yeah.
It just dawned on me as I was reflecting back, why didn't he remove himself from the room and allow me to continue my testimony?
Because the last thing he wanted was to have you share your research.
Oh my gosh, they don't want you talking about what's really going on. So I had to sit down. I had to be quiet. And I was a little shaky because I wasn't sure what was going to happen now. I actually didn't know that he decided on my case within 48 hours after me publicly testifying. I had no idea until probably about a week later. I got a text message from my daughter. And in her text message, she wrote, "Mom, I don't feel safe." That was her way of letting me know she was at risk. She's attempted her life before, and that was her code for letting me know that she was at risk. She's like, "Mom, I don't feel safe. I don't feel good. I really need to talk to you." And I was on my way to work, and I had no idea what to do. So I had a long commute to work, and I opted to call her counselor at school. And I said, "Look," I said, "just checking in to let you know that Amber texted me this morning. She's feeling unsafe. I directed her to you. I'm asking you to go find her. And then I'll check in later in the day. I heard nothing from no one. At lunch break, I called the school counselor to check in to see what the emergency was. And the school counselor informed me that Amber's dad was on his way to come get her, that she was going into crisis. I said, okay, thank you for letting me know that. I then hung up and got on the phone with Amber's dad and left him a voicemail saying, I'm being told by the school counselor that she's going into crisis, that you're going off to crisis center. I would like to know which one she's going to so I can be there for her, because every crisis up to this point, I was there. I found out where she was whenever I was informed in a timely fashion, that is. It's another story. And I was there for her, and I was her support system, and she appreciated my support, and nothing back from him. So I tried a couple more calls, no return call. So I started calling the crisis centers that we've been to in the past. A few of them didn't know what I was talking about, and I finally reached the proper center, and the woman answering the phone said, I'm under the impression that I cannot give you any information. Your former husband is here claiming that you've lost all of your parental rights and all decision-making power, and therefore I cannot give you any information.
And that's how you found out.
That's how I found out. That is how I found out. I was at work, and I literally fell apart. I could not function at work. I ended up leaving work, and I ended up getting let go from the job, and I'm not surprised. But I was, for the first time, hearing that I was no longer allowed to be involved in my daughter's care. I had no idea if she was healthy. I had no idea if she was going to get placed. I had no idea where she was, and I wasn't being allowed to talk to her to calm her down. I was the one that calmed her down. And yeah, I called the lady back and I said, look, I want you to see the papers. I've been threatened before, and there's been false statements before. I said, there is a chance that I have a right to know. I said, you should be seeing and demanding court papers that prove you can't talk to me. And sure enough, you know, an hour or so went by, and I can't remember if she called me or I called her, but she said, nope. He's got the court paper stating that you can't have any information regarding the well-being and welfare of your child. So I immediately contacted the lawyer who defended me, and I say that loosely, at trial, and I'm like, what is going on? Apparently, there's been a judgment, and I know nothing about it. How is it that he knows before I? Like, what is going on? If he came back with some lame thing, well, oh, I was meaning to mail it to you, but I haven't gotten around to it. And I realized again in hindsight that what happened was my former husband was privy to the judgment, made it clear to our children that I had no rights and no decision-making power, and that sent my daughter into crisis. I was her lifeline. I'd been her lifeline through all of this horrific in and out of court baloney, and she lost it, you know, and then of course I lost it, and I was really fearful that that judgment was going to be the judgment that would push my daughter to succeed in ending her life. It was crazy, Geerte. I received the order, and it was just about as awful as any parent could imagine. Every possible right was taken from me, right down to the judge stating that my son, even if he wanted to spend time with me, even though he was approaching the age of 18, his dad was given court permission to stop him from spending time with his mother. So all of the decision and all of the ability to judge whether or not daughter was going into crisis or not was put on the person that was putting her in crisis. And he
Yeah.
could use that judgment as a weapon. Like, no, well, you know, you're not going to be seeing him this weekend. And the judge was, what's the word? Creative enough, I guess. I can't find the right word. It's not the word I want to use. To put a footnote on the first page of the judgment order that his decision had nothing to do with my appearance before the committee to publicly testify on how family court could be improved upon.
Yeah, you made that footnote, but
He made that footnote. So my thought was that was like to let anybody else who looked at that judgment not to change any of it, because I was probably now marked as a whistleblower and someone who was empowered enough to speak truth to power. And I took that as a little note to all those other cohorts who might look over. I tried to appeal it. I tried to appeal the judgment, but you know what is interesting in family court is the person who made the decision also had the right to deny or accept the appeal. So my appeal, he sent back to me denied because it was the exact same judge.
of course, yeah, it's like a joke.
Right.
It's like a joke.
I'm like, how objective is that? It's like, oh my gosh, like it's like totally, I don't know.
It's a surreal, bizarre nightmare that, you know, you stumble into it and you think like, you know, as tragic as it is, at some point it becomes also completely laughable because it's so outrageous. You know?
Exactly. I was like, I couldn't believe, like, I thought that I could put forth this appeal and have it be seen by eyes that were going to be objective, because isn't that what justice should be? Objective. And it was completely like dismissed, you know, like I'm not gonna change my mind. There were accusations that were made about me that were untrue during trial. I submitted, you know, professional statements, you know, refuting those accusations. That got thrown out. It was just, and at that point, I'm like, you know, I'm done. I'm done with playing the game. It's not healthy. It's not going to help me. My voice is falling on deaf ears. It is what it is. And we moved forward and we worked to make the best of what we had. I continued to see the kids from time to time.
Did they come to you?
Yeah, they came to me because at this point in time now they had their driver's license, at least my son did. So he would drive them down, which I find really interesting because it speaks to the later allegations of what I was as a mom. Doesn't make sense, because if I was this horrible mom, if I was this whatever I've been accused of, why would they drive down and continue to come see me when they had every court right to never speak to me again? But they continue to come, and my present husband and I continue to give them, you know, everything that I thought that they could use for healing. We took them on trips. We, you know, made it all about them when they were here. It was all quality time. We have a very large family. We made sure we were always together. They were doted on as far as quality time and quality interaction, and just trying to show them by modeling what healthy communication and healthy relationships and healthy child-parent interactions look like. I'm fortunate that my present husband, you know, was married before and has you know, a lovely older child that, you know, they got to see, my children got to see him as a father, and, you know, what do fathers do for their children? So, you know, he was a really good role model, I believed, and we had some good times. And I, again, naively believed that as our youngest, aged out of the system, which is, high school graduation, that we would be free to start recreating and building our family life that we used to have. And I was shocked, again, completely blindsided, that the exact opposite happened. We went from April, the month of April, where, we bought Amber a prom dress for senior prom. I was making appointments to get her nails done, her hair done, and we were doing things preparing for her graduation and prom, and preparing for a trip in July as a family. We got the kids' passports. We were all going to go together, my present husband, myself, my 2 teenagers. For our first trip, we haven't had a family trip since April of 2010. We haven't been together for 5 days solid since August of 2010. It was a time to rejoice and celebrate, and despite our efforts, neither teen joined us on our vacation. My present husband invested in a trip for 4 people, and only 2 people went. And I was framed as being a not nice person. And as of July 1st, my son has opted to go no contact with me. So I have no relationship now with either child. Like that.
So you were presented the bill of all this toxic energy that the children both were dealing with full time for years in a row.
Yeah. I think with Amber, she'd have like that up-down roller coaster. She'd realize her reality, react to it, then she'd go back into that safe place of denial, and it was up and down, up and down, up and down. But she had been coping with it for quite some time. Our son seemed like unaffected by any of it. He wasn't the target. I understand that it's not unusual to have like the golden child and then the scapegoat, and my son, I saw him as being the golden child and our daughter as being the scapegoat. And he seemed unscathed, and he seemed steady and even-tempered. Never said any unkind words to me. Never expressed anger. So the only thing that I can conclude is that it's been building up and building up and building up, and his way of dealing with it is just exploding. And the only way for him to deal with it at present is just to go no contact with me. It was odd. He went from June 29th thanking me. I gave him money for summer clothes, because if we were going away, the last thing I wanted was for his dad to feel the obligation of having to buy him a wardrobe for going away. I didn't want that stress or pressure or that negative energy. So I said, whatever you need to go away, I'll give you money for summer clothes, whatever it is. And I gave him a check for the summer clothes. I was met with a thank you. I got a text message, thanking me for that gift. He was going to go shopping on Friday, July 1st. We were leaving that night, Friday, July 1st. So he thanked me, and somewhere between Wednesday night and Friday morning, that gift got reframed as me buying his affection, that I was paying for his loyalty, and that he was not going to go on the trip with us, and that he didn't want to have anything to do with me ever again. So we're talking a complete 180 in the matter of 48 hours. The interesting thing, Geerte, is for as horrible as I am, that check got cashed. That check got cashed. When I got back from my trip, I was curious. I'm like, boy, if I was really an awful person and that check was written with, with malicious motives, wouldn't you just like, I don't want your gifts. Like, I don't, you can't buy me. I don't want your gifts. Wouldn't part of your empowerment process be to reject anything from the person that was harming you?
Yeah, there's no logic behind
No.
this. It has to do with manipulation on the other end, and the way things get explained to children, and they're unfortunately apparently not all the way to the point yet where they can actually think for themselves yet. I mean, and it must be extremely difficult for them as they've been living in this manner of kind of dissociating from the situation, right? Because contact with you, it's probably very painful for them, right?
Right.
It racks, it kind of like brings up what they're missing. So maybe it's easier for them to just shove it out completely and not deal with it.
Right.
If you were able to give your children a message now, like let's say they're going to watch the YouTube recording of this interview, what is it you would want to share with them?
Oh my gosh. I want to share so much. I want to share so much. I've told them 1,000 times, and I'll say it again. All I've ever wanted for them was for them to be happy and healthy and safe. That's all I've ever wanted. I can take my ego and my feelings out of this, and it's not about choosing a parent. I've never, despite everything that's happened, despite my feelings, I've never asked them to choose one parent over the other. I've never denied them an opportunity to have a relationship. That's between them and their dad. That's not between me and my kids. That's separate. What I would like for them, I would like for my son to respect women. I'd like for him to get counseling and learn about what a healthy relationship looks like. I'd like for him to be strong enough to discern the truth from deception. But most importantly, I want him to know that I did the best I could under some very difficult circumstances to give them as much love and support and examples of what unconditional love looks like. And for my daughter, oh, she used to be so empowered. I want for her to be strong again and have her voice again. I want her to question authority and not live in fear for doing so.
Right on.
Oh my gosh, I want her to keep questioning authority and not have fear for doing so. I understand, I get 100% because I know of some of the threats that they were met with, especially her. I understand her need to survive. I get that. And I will never, ever, ever, ever hold their decisions against them. I get it. I understand. I don't agree, but I get it. They're living in a situation where they're going off to college, and in order to get in-state tuition, which is a huge worry on a lot of young kids' minds today, is the cost of a higher education. I get their need to bond with their provider, and I get it. I just hope and pray that they learn what healthy boundaries really mean. It doesn't mean no contact with someone who loves you.
I mean, you've been made into this villain mom, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable because there's nothing about you. Because I've known you for quite a bit on my interactions with you through social media. There's nothing about you that is ever given me the impression that you're aggressive or inappropriate or not caring. I mean, there's nothing about you, as far as I can see, that would ever make you an unfit a parent that shouldn't have any parental rights. I think we need to recoin this phrase high conflict divorce into a terroristic divorce.
Right. Right.
And this coercive control that your ex has applied through the courts and whittled away at your custody and then your parental rights and then visitation and then all contact, that strategy should be illegal.
It should be. I agree, Geerte. And I'm under the impression that it's illegal in the UK. I have a protective mom that I am in connection with through social media, and she said 18 months ago, the UK as illegal, has made coercive control illegal. And so that is one of the things that I would love to see here in the United States, because there are a lot of professionals, and I say professionals loosely, making a lot of money off of these high conflict cases. And I remember the GAL, the last one we had, playing it up like, this is the biggest file I've ever seen, the two of you, meaning my former husband and myself, are, so this is ridiculous, the amount of conflict and yada, 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 yada. And so
there's no conflicts. There's only conflict going from one end.
Right.
So let's...
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, are you going to be, do you want to put the call-in number on the show right now if viewers want? Because this is kind of like the point where we're kind of opening up the discussion to us, where we're discussing all these types of cases, because all our cases are the same. I mean, right. It's like the sociopath divorce. Again, it's not high conflict. It's only coming from one end. And that needs to be recognized, and it needs to not just be made illegal, but there needs to be criminal consequences placed because of the damage and the human rights violations inflicted on the mothers and children. That's my opinion, and I'm just throwing it out there.
Right. I agree, because in one of the last text messages at the same time that my son decided to go no contact with me, the only person he was conversing with via texting was my present husband. And at one point he had written something in a text message saying, the courts don't make any mistakes. They took away my rights for a reason. So I'm like, where is he getting this from? He wasn't present at trial. He wasn't present in court. And in theory, we're not allowed to talk to the kids about adult subject matter. So why is he bringing this up now? And my present husband went into my defense. He's like, Matthew, he said to Matthew, my present husband said to Matthew that, he had been present at all of the hearings and all of, at trial. And he said he heard the character assassination and the lies and the untruths, and he was present as a witness. And Matthew just couldn't hear it. He just, didn't want to talk to my present husband. Like, if you can't side with me and give me the reality that I need to accept right now, I want nothing to do with you as well. So
I understand it too, because for them it is, how can a child that's, going through adolescence even begin to make sense of the situation?
Right.
They've grown up with mom, everything's been just fine, and all of a sudden they're being fed this nonsense story about mom is dangerous and crazy and going to be damaging for you if you talk to her and have coffee with her, or whatever nonsense these guys feed the kids.
Right.
And then they're all confused because here's a judge actually signing off on this nonsense. Yeah. And there's these lawyers there with the kids, and they're like, "We'll take care of you." Like,
Right.
These kids, they must be like, something's wrong with mom. Like, what is it? What it is, we don't know, but we miss her, but we're not allowed to have contact. And why? And so I think for them, I think in the end they just say, let's just cut that whole part out of our life so we don't have to deal with it, because how do we even begin to make sense of it? That is my assumption. I would love to have child survivors of this who are now adults, or even if they're not adults, come on the show and talk about what it's like to be confused like this. Because I know my ex waves around the court orders like, see,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I won all these court cases, so the mom is crazy. Yeah.
Right,
And everyone's drinking his Kool-Aid, you know? And
that is true. That is true, Geerte. Yeah, that is true. It's like those pieces of paper. That's the other thing I learned is the power of words. Oh my gosh, the power of words. And these, again, professionals, whether it's a lawyer, a judge, a GAL, they need to be held accountable because their words hold so much power. And with power becomes responsibility. And if they can't be responsible, they should not be allowed to practice. My former husband's attorney submitting paperwork to the court claiming my children are terrified to be with me to justify what. And I'm thinking to myself, I said to my attorney at one point, one of my attorneys, I said, where is this coming from? Because if something's going on, I want to know. If my kids are truly being terrified in my presence, I want to know so I can change whatever it is I'm doing. And he admitted to me it was a tactic they used
of course,
to get court's attention. And it was
of
at that
course.
point I told them I didn't need his services anymore. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm paying you how much per hour to play a game?
Well, you're bringing up a really good point, and you were talking about this earlier on in the interview too, about when you go into these court situations and you're not aware of what's happening in family courts, and you're hiring an attorney, you think like, well, they're going to take care of it. I don't have to learn the law. I don't have to know. I'll tell them my story. I'll tell them what happened. They'll put it on paper, and the judge will listen. I mean, that's how I went into it, right? What I've learned since then is like, no, you cannot trust your own attorney. First of all, the attorney might be paid off or in collusion with the good old boy networks of other attorneys and judges, and they're actually going on the golf court together and deciding their cases there. So what you have to do if you decide to have an attorney is to actually do all the work yourself. You have to write the entire freaking motion yourself.
Yeah.
And then you have them you assign them the paralegal function.
Right.
So you're telling them, okay, tell me, did I check off the right boxes on the form? Did I cross all my X's and sign the papers? Am I filing it in the right way? Fine. Yeah. But you shouldn't have to pay $400 or $500 an hour. I had an attorney charging me $230 per email just to read a freaking email.
Oh my God.
And you know what? I'll have a show where I will show her her invoices.
Wow.
Let's talk about outing these people. Do you? Let's talk about that. Do you want to name? Do you know I name the name of your judge?
It's a public record. You know, divorce files are in the courthouse, and they're public records. So I can name everybody, and all I'm doing.
Go ahead. Let's do it.
The judge that heard the last trial and stripped me of all parental rights is Judge Driscoll. And they moved our court case to Springvale, Maine, because that's where all the high conflict cases go. And my attorney, who I did try to file a grievance against, and that got thrown out, he took $15,000 from us.
What's his name?
His name is McDaniel. He was a New Hampshire licensed and Maine licensed family lawyer. I want to say James McDaniel. Again, sometimes things get fuzzy because it's such a traumatic experience.
It's legal abuse.
He took my present husband's retirement money, is what we used because we had nothing. Promised he would fight for our rights. And this is the other little tidbit for moms that are going through the process. make sure you get audios of all of your appearances. You need to, depending on your state, you'll have to check your state. It's probably different in different states, but a couple weeks prior to your case conference or hearing or trial, you submit a form saying that you want an audio transcript. I was all over that. I was getting records all the time. I had this pie in the sky belief that some civil rights lawyer would hear what was going on and come to my rescue, but that hasn't happened yet. But I have my attorney state on the record apologizing that he had been the busiest he's ever been, Your Honor, and did not prepare for trial. This is a trial that was to discuss whether or not I was going to be in my children's life. And he had the audacity to show up at trial and confess that he didn't prepare. And the judge said,
This is James
James McDaniel, yes.
James McDaniel. All right, James McDaniel, you are outed right now here on Hell is for Children.
Outed. He is outed. He
outed. For all the protective mothers out there, do not hire attorney James McDaniel in Maine.
No. He promised me he'd fight hard, that he's done criminal cases and he's not afraid of anybody. But showed up telling everybody, told the whole court that he was unprepared. I had witnesses. That's the other thing. I always brought people with me to all my court appearances, from DV advocates to family members to my present husband. I always went with another set of ears and eyes so that I would have validation that what I heard and saw was actually really happening, and I always had witnesses with me.
I record everything. I just record everything on my cell phone. Yeah. And then I transcribe it myself, and then once I do get the minute orders, which they haven't been willing to give me for 2 years, I wonder why, I will put them right next to the recordings, and if there are any discrepancies there, great, let's go after them, because everything that's happened in that entire case is one big due process violation. So
Yeah, so we took him, we made a complaint against the bar exam for his inability to prepare for trial, which in my opinion is why we lost everything. And what I found out with the Maine Bar Association was that unless we could prove that he billed us for hours that he didn't put into our case, I had no recourse for getting our money back. So we spent $15,000 for a trial attorney who showed up unprepared and didn't know, like, I think of the movie, like My Cousin Vinny. Like, I swear to God, I could have been as more of an effective trial lawyer for myself, because I knew what what the opposing party's arguments were going to be, and I knew how to refute them and prove them wrong, but he just didn't know what he was doing.
What happened with your complaint?
Oh, that got thrown out because the only way to get our money back on the fees was to show or prove, prove that he billed us for hours that he didn't actually, and like, how do you prove that he's not doing the work that he, like, unless you're following him around and looking in his window in his office, it's not possible to prove that he didn't put in the hours that he claimed he put in. That's like,
did you file a complaint against the judge?
I did not, because quite honestly, Geerte, because of my daughter's emotional state, my focus, the legal recourse and the legal aspects became backseat to keeping my daughter alive. I spent every day after that judgment making sure that I had people watching my daughter, looking over my daughter. I did everything I could. That's the other tactic they use, is that make sure, not only does it help them to sever the tie from the mom, but it also helps them to sever the tie from the community, because had they stayed in community, I had other parents watching my kids for me and getting back to me about things that they heard and saw. But when they move them far, far away in a community that you have no involvement, nobody knows who you are.
Sociopaths will always isolate the victim.
Yeah, so it's like, I didn't know their friends. I didn't know their friends' mothers. It became a huge challenge. But I had some people that were working for me and just keeping an eye on them and getting back to me if they had concerns. And So that was my job number one, was to make sure my daughter was.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
For the protective mothers who are in the situation that we're in and want to file a complaint against the judge, or if you want to at some point still do that, I want to share my screen here because once you file a complaint, it goes to the Commission of Judicial Performance of your state. And what you're looking at right now is the fact that in California, the Commission of Judicial Performance, that's supposed to, keep an eye on these corrupt judges and actually deal with the complaints, is as corrupt, apparently, because as the judges themselves, there are like 200,000 complaints filed about judges in California alone. And this has been going on for quite a while, and it's getting worse and worse. And I wanted to share this post with you. This is a great victory because a small organization in Marin County, California, where my case is, called the Center for Judicial Excellence, organized an effort to audit the auditor, which is apparently necessary in California. That's how corrupt it is. So you're filing a complaint against the judge, and then you would think that your complaint will be reviewed by an honest review board, but it is not. And that's how they that's how they get away with inflicting these human rights violations on, case after case, and keep it going for years after years after years. But that's coming to an end. This is a very important effort. This is another article on the same topic. California takes steps towards improving judicial accountability. So here we had a situation like yours and like mine, where the daughter was placed in full custody of the abuser, and the father actually murdered his daughter after he sexually abused her, exactly because of this, right? We're filing complaints, like, for example, in your case and in my case, if we file complaints against the judge, then these judges need to be held accountable. And if we don't even have access to an honest review board, then we're lost, because then it's just we're mothers and children are turned over to wild animals, basically. So this is a very important effort, and it was a successful one. And now we can only hope that the people who are going to do the audit of the auditors are honest, right? I mean, you start wondering, like, how far does the corruption go up, right? Some people are very skeptical. If you read the comments underneath these articles, you can see how bitter parents are about all of this. And as you know, it's mostly mothers going through this. There's so much bitterness. Like, there's no belief in the system anymore. There's no hope in the system anymore. And for all those people out there who are in that state of bitterness, I want to say, let's try it anyway.
Let's try it
anyway, because sitting around and bitching about it is not going to do anything either.
Exactly.
So, and it doesn't have to be the only way we fight. We have to fight this Medusa monster with 3 heads from several angles and by the thousands, It can be complaints, it can be demonstrations, it can be social media activism, it can be the calling the DA for Mandy, who's in jail over crossing the wrong box on a form and being jailed for $750,000 bail. Whatever it is, we need to use every opportunity to fight and to support each other. And that's one of the things that you do as well. I've seen you do this on Facebook, for example, being involved in cases from other mothers, being supportive to them, and figuring out, how do we set up a court watch? What can we do in this particular case and in that particular case? share a little bit about the activism that you're currently doing.
Thank you, Geerte. Thank you for asking me. What I've learned to do, it's a strategy that has helped me survive all of this. For example, if we back up to the time period in which I lost the ability to nurture and be present in my kids' daily lives, is I opted to better myself, and that's when I delved into full-time university studies. I was accepted at university in 2003, and I was taking like one three credit class a year because that's all I could have time for when I was raising the kids and working full-time. And what I did was I took advantage. I thought, well, I want to raise my kids. I want to be the full-time mother. If you're going to take that away from me and you give me all this free time, I'm getting my education. Because I knew that every time I went to better myself, it would just, I thought naively, it would deter my former from doing that because he didn't want me to better myself. He didn't want me to go back to school. He didn't want me to get my education. And it didn't work, but I got my education. He still wanted to keep the kids. So now I'm looking at, the same thing. I'm presented with, at a time that I thought I was going to be rejoicing and being with my kids and, rebuilding our family structure, all of a sudden I'm left no contact. So conveniently, that gives me plenty of time to work on activism. Truth be told, Geerte, if they weren't no contact with me, if we were rebuilding, I would put all my energy in getting my children well and getting reunited with them and working on our relationship. I wouldn't have time for all this. The universe is presenting me with an opportunity that I feel like I need to take advantage of. So I've done different things. Like, for example, I've read some books, and I buy these books in bulk sometimes, and what I do is I read them and I reach out to the authors and I thank them for being brave enough to publish their stories and their testimony, and then I mail them to appropriate people. I mail them to therapists, doctors, court people, legal people, and just start educating them. So that's been one of the strategies that I've done to feel like I'm being proactive and I'm being part of the solution. I've even, around Mother's Day, I photocopied a bunch of research articles and some of the work that other protective moms have done, and I've put up a little folding table with a nice little tablecloth, and I just stood out in a high traffic area. I just got into conversation with people that walked by and were interested in hearing my story. And I'm thinking of doing that again. I really enjoyed that. It was really frightening and scary to do it at first, but there's something very empowering by doing something that scares the hell out of you. And the first time out there, I thought for sure I was going to be met with anger and opposition. And I've met the most kind and receptive people that I was hoping to meet. I met them. And so I'm thinking of doing the same thing and just questioning people of how much they might know or don't know about coercive control and what they think of when they hear the word domestic abuse, and just start getting some like anecdotal data so I could get involved with the legislation and getting some laws changed. But I'm really working on outreach, reaching out to organizations. For example, I found a lovely lady who is involved in a nonprofit to prevent teen suicide. So I'm connecting with her to say, did you realize that one of the common factors for teen suicide is having this experience?
Yep.
So I'm looking for opportunities. I'm looking for doors to open, and when they open, I walk right through.
Well, let me show you here an organization that I think would benefit a lot from your experience. It is this organization, Legislative Drafting Institute for Child Protection at Southern University Law Center. And this is actually an organization that is these are law students that are looking at cases just like ours to create change in legislation. And these are the types of organizations that we need to approach, in my opinion, because these folks are going to be in possibly in the role of attorney or possibly in the role of policymakers. You see, this is the summer 2016 legislative drafting students, right? So these are the folks who are going to be creating the legislation that is going to be affecting the next generation of children. And we got to make sure that they actually understand the way the system currently is set up to be pro-abuse, right? This is a pro-abuse system. The abuser wins because money is made out of creating victims. And so they must understand the dark side of the family court reality and the results that it has for protecting mothers and children. We need to make sure that these folks are thoroughly involved, and we need to share with them, the folks who are inflicting these human rights violations, how, to what extent that is happening, the fatalities, the suicides that you are mentioning of the children, the suicides of the mothers. And again, these are all clickable links that will take you to the stories of these children. And I want to show you this one here. This is Jack. He committed suicide at the age of 29. Just also goes to show you that this doesn't go away. It doesn't magically go away once the kids have moved out of the parental home. The damage that's inflicted can go untreated and then have such a result at a later age. The father in this case now realized that he did the wrong thing. And this is very important to me because I would like all the fathers that are watching right now who are keeping their children hostage, please look at this, because this man is sorry for what he did. He now doesn't have a son anymore. So was it worth it? No. He realizes the damage that he inflicted. For all those law students that are watching, for all the legislative students that are watching, that are going into this field, check out the Mommy Science database. Again, these are all clickable links of stories, just like Ruth's story and my story. You can click on all these links. They will bring up individual stories. Any of these, you can see that the pattern of us losing custody is the same in all of these cases. Doesn't matter which link you click. The core of the stories is all the same. So again, very important for legislative students, for law students to understand why this is happening and that this is a global pattern and that it's basically a scam. A money-making scam that's inflicted mostly by men on women, mostly by fathers on mothers. That is not to say that there are not also fathers who are victims of sociopath mothers, but the gross majority of the cases is the mothers. I have written a piece on what are solutions to it. So feel free to check that out. And all these links, these are all clickable links that will take you to source data. This website will be created at a larger scale later on this year with larger databases and other ways of support for protective mothers to connect and to build resources. So, for example, the books that you're mentioning, we can then make a list of all the books that are relevant on this topic, right? So we have everything placed together um, as one resource page, so to speak.
Right.
Like
Right.
the book that you're mentioning from Harmon Snow, and he did a wonderful job explaining how children are stolen in this manner, in the way that happened to you.
Exactly. He mentions a case from the state of Maine, which gives me the shivers. And this is why I can't be quiet, Geerte, because it's just, there's so, one of my acquaintances, and I'm not sure, I don't have a link to where the source is, but she's claiming that 1,000 moms in the state of Maine have lost parental rights compared to the 500 men. So you're right, it isn't just one gender necessarily, but obviously, statistically speaking, if that is an accurate statistic, twice as many moms are losing complete parental rights. There's 1,000 of us, and we're not even connected to each other. Like, we have to find a way to connect, because I hate the idea that they think that they're alone and that they're the only ones, when obviously they're not. The other book that I think, this prepared me for what just happened with me. This prepared me for, as a possibility that I would lose contact with my kids completely. Donna's story is all about emotional, psychological, verbal. And for me, this was more relevant to my personal case, where of my knowledge, I have no knowledge of physical or sexual abuse, but this explains how devastating, and I hate to say this, but it's actually legal, verbal, psychological, and emotional. At this point in time in the United States, it's legal. You, as a parent, evidently have every right to ruin your child by telling them on a daily basis.
Why it's so effective for abusers. It's not visible with the eye, but it can be even more damaging than physical abuse. I tell you, if I had a choice, I would rather be beaten up than be at the end of the psychological and legal abuse that I've had to suffer over the last, I've been in my case for 7 years now.
Oh my gosh.
7 years of legal battles.
Wow. And some of the things that I've witnessed as red flags for pediatricians or counselors, school counselors. If you have a child that has many of these symptoms, from bedwetting to cutting to depression, anxiety, to gastrointestinal, vomiting, absenteeism, drop in grades, drugs, alcohol, and suicide attempts, that should be a red flag that maybe their home environment isn't as nurturing as it should be. I'm not a professional, but I'm guessing that those would be red flags, but none of that was enough to have her removed from that environment. And that is, that's unbelievable to me. That's
a great point. I think we've touched on some really good ways to educate folks that are might not be aware that this is going on. The legislative students, law students, but also professionals and pediatricians, for example, maybe school counselors. This is the way that you and I, who are now with all this, we have all this time, that we can start educating the system from within, because not everyone has an evil agenda. There's a lot of good people out there who don't want this. And, that's a good note to end our interview on, because we're kind of out of time, and a very positive one. And I commend you for the strength that you have to be able to transform that grief and the anger into this activism and to continue. I hope that your children will find the link to this interview, because I think it will be extremely healing for them, however hard it will be for them to watch this. I think it will be very healing for them to hear your side of the story, since they have only been fed nonsense for years in a row. They can then process that And I have one message for both your children, and that is, think for yourself. Think for yourself. Go back into your memories and remember what it was like to be with mom. Was it all that bad as it's made out to be? I don't think so. So, and one more message for them would be to do your own thing. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Take your power back, right?
Thank you.
Love to do that. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Geerte, for having me as a guest. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It takes a lot of courage. It's difficult to do, and I realize that. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping it's helpful for all the viewers out there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And I hope you join me again next week on another episode of Hells for Children.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Conscious Consumer Network was designed to create a live broadcast TV network for free and independent media and has been live on the air since the 1st of January 2015. CCN gets